is the embroidery for the guitar handbag. There are 3 files. So one of them is this rectangle here, which I've duplicated. One is for the 2 lines and the other one is for the 4 buttons. So there's 3 files, but this first one you put in twice. I'm lucky enough to have a large enough hoop to be able to put all of them in the one hoop together. If you're not, you can just do each file and just re-hoop. I have my template. So what I've done is I've just put my template in there like that because I want to make sure that when I press this button, it's going to show me that it is going to stitch out in the right spot. So I can see we're in the right spot there. So now I can just remove that. Now I've got my vinyl hooped. I hoop everything. Other people float. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just going to stick to what I know. And now I'm just going to program my colours. Then for my buttons, I've got black, grey, and black. Okay, now we're ready to go. First thing it's going to do is it's going to mark out the first placement. I'm going to put that over the top. And take my hoop off. Trimmed off all my edges, put the hoop back in. So now I've stitched out my front guitar panel, and now we need to make it into one of these. So what we're going to do is from the back, we're going to flip it over, and then we're going to match up our embroidery to a spot that looks good for you, and then we're just going to trace around it with a pen. Make sure it doesn't move. Okay, and then we're going to cut it out. Try and take your time when you're doing this, because we're going to sew this straight onto the other panel, and you'll be able to see these raw edges. So if you can get a nice smooth cut, it'll really look much better. There you have it, that's our panel. Now I'm going to take my front panel of my guitar, and I'm going to position it so it has even space all the way around it. And I'm going to take some double-sided tape, and I'm just going to put a couple of pieces underneath, not anywhere that I'm going to be stitching. So once you're happy with your position, just put a piece under there. Okay, I'll do the same for the other end. And then for each side. Now that is stuck on there, and it won't move. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the machine, and using a nice long top stitch, we're going to go right on the very edge and sew all the way around this white panel. I'm starting at the bottom, and I'm just going to do 1 or 2 stitches, back stitch, and then away we go. Now slow wins the race with this because we want it to be really, really nice. Now when I get to the corner, even though it's rounded, I'm just going to go 1 stitch at a time, just so I can make sure that I am staying nice and close to the edge. And there we have a nice stitching right close to the edge all the way around. Now am going to be making my vinyl cording. So my vinyl piece is 35 inches long and it's 1.5 inches wide. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece the same length of 3mm cord, and I'm going to place it in the middle, and I'm going to fold that over, and I'm just going to stitch it all the way down the side using a cording foot. To make my cord, I am going to be using a cording foot. A cording foot has a little groove there that you can place the cord under and it'll help put it all together. If you don't have a cording foot, you can use a zipper foot. A zipper foot probably would have come with your machine. So we just need something that's going to help stitch right up against the cord. So they're easy to change. All we're going to do is unscrew the foot that we've got on there now. Take that one off. Okay, put this one on. And tighten it up. Now, even though it is quite a thick foot, this is I'm using 3mm cord and a 4mm cording foot. Now that we've got our cording foot on, you can see that there's a hole in the middle of the foot. There's the place underneath where the cording will actually go. And you can see that the needle is stitching right up against the cord, and that's why I'm saying if you don't have a cording foot, you can use a zipper foot, because all you need to do is get nice and close to the cord. So I'm using 3mm cording and a 4mm cording foot. Now with my cording is the same length as my vinyl, so I've just placed it in the middle and I'm folding it over, but I'm going to start sewing about 2 inches down from the start. When I get to the other end, I'm going to stop about 2 inches from the end as well, but I'm not going to backstitch. And I'm going to do the same for the other one. Now, the reason I've left that open is because where the stitching ends, I'm going to trim off that piece of cording. And then I'm going to just stitch along there and close it up. And I'm going to do the same on the other end. Now I'm swapping back to my regular foot before I finish off those little bits. Okay. So now I'm going to the end piece, so that's where my stitching stopped. We've cut the cord out, but I'm going to continue stitching just down there as if there was a cord. But I'm going to back stitch here over those stitches to secure them in place, and then I'm going to back stitch over here as well. And I'm going to do that for all 4 ends. So now I've got a piece of cording, and the cording goes to there, and then this bit has no cording. And that's so when we have our seams, there's not as much bulk in the seams. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach the cording to the front and back panels. So I'm going to start half an inch. I'm just going to start half an inch above the side of the panel, and I'm going to clip it in place. And I'm going to go round, and as I'm going to clip this so it follows the shape of the guitar. So by putting little cuts in it, see how it's able to bend and it'll follow? But then over here we need to remove bulk. So here we need to create more space. Over here we need to remove that bulk. So I'm going to cut some little triangles into there. Now don't cut all the way up to the cording. I cut about halfway because that'll still be within my seam allowance and you won't see it. So take our clips and we'll start clipping. See, so now when we go this way, you'll see that that bulk is being removed. Now if you need to remove more, take more out. And you've got to make sure that it's sitting down flat. You don't want it bubbling up anywhere. So now you'll see that this is on. There is a little bit of overhang there, which is fine. But you'll see that my cording starts there and there. So later on when we're stitching, we're only going to be stitching through the vinyl. We're not going to be stitching through vinyl and cord. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this to the machine, and just using our regular sewing machine foot, we're going to place it up against where the cording is, and we're going to stitch all the way around. Now that means that the actual stitching line will be in at about 1/2 inch, which is fine because right now all we're doing is basting it on. Later we're going to, when we sew the front and back together, we're going to be using a zipper foot to get it right up close. So now you'll see I've got my cording stitched on. So you'll see that there's a line that's right up close, which is the line that we made when we stitched the cording in the vinyl. And then this time, as we stitched around, it left the line here. Now later on, when we actually stitch the sides together, that zipper foot's going to be pressing right up against there. So this is going to be well within the seam allowance. And you can see all my little clippings are within the seam allowance as well. Now that we've got both of those done, I'm just going to trim off that little bit of excess. Okay, and those two pieces are now done. we have our front panel here, and it has our embroidered panel sewn on, and now we've done our piping. And remember, we didn't put piping in this part, so when we sew the top, there'll be less bulk. Now what we need to do is put the strings on the guitar. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this. Now, when you have these done, you will see that these all line up. So there's 6 dots, one for each of the strings, and we want to start them just here, not on here, but just at the top here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a ruler and an erasable texter, and we're going to go right through the center of each of those circles. So starting here, and we're going to go all the way over, all the way up, all the way up. And then we're going to go to the next one and do the same thing. So we're going to do that for each of those 6. I am going to start on the one over here. Take your time doing this, because if you get them straight, they'll look fantastic. If you get them wobbly, no big deal, but it'll look better if they're straight. All the way to the top. Now this texture will just wipe off after. Now the reason I did the line on this side first is because now through my ruler I'm just making sure that it's straight on both edges. And the last one. Okay, so now I have my lines ruled. So now I'm going to take this over to the other machine, and I'm going to start here and sew all the way to the end, and I'm going to use a grey thread. Alright, I'm going to start near the bottom. I'm using the longest stitch length, so it's a nice decorative stitch length. And I'm going to do 2 stitches and back stitch, and then follow that line all the way down. And just go nice and slow to make sure you get them nice and straight. And when you get right to the very end, back stitch. And turn it around, and we're going to go back the other way this time. Okay, so now we've got nice straight strings all the way to the top. So now I'm just going to give that a wipe and get rid of all of that blue erasable ink. I've given that a wipe down, so now you'll be able to see that that blue erasable ink is now gone. It hasn't left any marks or anything. So we can move on. Now we're going to work on putting the gusset in. Now what I need to do is find the center of this bottom panel. And the way I'm going to do that is just by folding those, and I'm going to match up these curved bottom pieces. And put a mark there. And the same on this one. Put a mark there. So now I know where my centers are. Now I'm going to take my 2 gusset pieces, and I'm going to put them face together, and using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to stitch along here. Then I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to top stitch both sides. Just change my thread back to a white thread. There's a lot of thread changing and foot changing in this pattern. Okay, I've got my joining stitch length. I'm using a 3. I'm going 1/2 inch from the edge, and I'm back stitching and all the way across. Trim off the threads. I'm going to open that up, and then I'm going to top stitch both sides of that with my longer stitch length. Okay, so now I've got my gusset joined together, and I've got my beautiful stitching on both sides of the seam. Now one of these panels is 1/2 inch longer than the other. So you'll see that one's now 16.5 inches, one's 17 inches. The 17 inch is going to go on the longer side here. So I'm going to start there at the top. I'm just going to put one clip. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom, and I'm going to clip together just where that center marking is. And then we're going to start here. Now, remember how when we put the piping on, we used all those little clips? I'm going to do the same thing now. Okay, we're all clipped in. Now, to sew this in and get a nice even seam where our piping is, we need to get right up against that. And the only way to do that now is by using a zipper foot. So I'm going to put the zipper foot on my machine, and then I'm going to stitch as close to the piping all the way around as I can. And then that'll give us a nice finish on our beautiful gold glitter guitar. I'm going to swap out my foot for a zipper foot. Now, with my zipper foot, this one allows my needle to be on the left-hand side of the foot, which means it's going to be closer to my piping. I'm just going to check I've got enough bobbin thread to get all the way around, which I don't have. Lucky I checked. I'm going to get a new bobbin. Put that in there, pull our thread up. Alright, now I'm going to drop my stitch length to about a 3. And now, remember at the start, we took some of the cording out of here. So you've got to be careful because we still want to sew as though there is cording there so it matches. So we're going to start right at the top of the panel. Feel our way. And I'm going to start and a back stitch. Alright, now we're going to try and keep all of this in the right spot as we go. And you want that needle nice and close to that piping. Especially in this curve, because that's where it can get a bit tricky. If you have to go stitch by stitch, do it stitch by stitch. Now just checking as I go that I've got a nice tight finish. If I find any spots later, I will come back and fix them where I think it can be closer. But notice I am going slow because I am feeling my way. And you should be at about 1/2 inch of a seam allowance. So that'll also help guide you. Don't stress if this does hurt your arms, take a rest. I find that not a lot of people mention the fact that this does hurt your arms. Or is it just me? Oh. I find this curved part is the trickiest. And back stitch. Okay, let's take a look. So when I turn it out, you'll see that I have got a nice tight finish around my piping. So that's all looking good, which means we can move on to the other side. So now you'll see that even though this top piece doesn't have cord in it anymore, we have still sewn as if it was, So we've still got that nice same size line all the way around, but we don't have that bulk here now. So when we turn the bag in the other way and we're sewing down the top stitching down the lining, there won't be as much bulk. All right, I'm just going to trim off this little bit here so it's all nice and even. I am going to remove a little bit of that. So do the same on both sides, and now I'm going to take my back panel and I'm going to put it face down, and starting on this side we're going to go around and do exactly the same thing, clipping this middle panel here. So just the same as before, we are now going to stitch all the way around the edge here using our zipper foot, doing exactly the same thing as we did last time. Okay, looks like I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to go round and I'm going to clip through all the layers to help my bag when we turn it out, because we want it to sit really nice. Why would we have gone through all the trouble of doing all that clipping and then not clip the middle layers? So you're not clipping all the way up to the seam, you're just clipping about halfway. Alright, now that, you can even see how that's sitting flatter now. It's not pulling or anything like that. So we've got nice, flat, curved seams. Now we're going to move on to our lining. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install our zipper pocket. Now, we want to make sure that we are doing this on the right side. So, my back piece is the one where I've got my logo, and they need to be like that. So it'll be, because we won't be seeing the inside, we'll be seeing the outside pieces. So this is the piece that it's going to go on. So we're going to take our zipper pocket and we're going to find a nice spot for it. So I'm going to want it to sit just under these curves, so about here. So I've ironed my pocket in half, and I'm just going to put it there. Now we're going to make sure that it is straight, because that can be a bit tricky. Oops. And I'm going to measure down 1/2 inch from that crease. And then 1/2 inch again. And that is going to be where my zipper pocket is. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch around that square. Back stitch. So now I've got that sewed in there. Now I'm going to cut a line down the center of that box that I just made. And when I get to the ends, I'm going to make a little V shape. Careful not to cut through any of those stitches. Spin it around and do the same thing at the other end. And then I'm going to push this through the hole. I'm going to turn it over. And there's my zipper pocket. So now I'm going to take this over to the iron, and I'm just going to iron that all flat. And then you'll see we've got a beautiful square. Rectangle. It's a rectangle. Okay, so now we've got that. Now all I need to do is slip my zip underneath, center it, and then I'm just going to stitch all the way around there. Now I've got my zip in. It's all looking lovely. Now we're going to close our zipper pocket. So we're just going to fold that down. And we're going to fold that front panel out of the way. And we're just going to line them up and stitch 1/4 inch all the way down the side of the pocket. We're not going to sew the bottom. We're only sewing the edges. So get all of that out of the way. A little 1/4 inch seam allowance. The other side. And we are done. So that's in there now. Now we're going to install a little bit of gold glitter here for our magnetic closure. So we're going to find the center, and that's about there. Whoops. And I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to find the center. That's where it's got to go. Now I'm just going to get a tiny little piece of double-sided tape. Now, where that 1.5 inches is, that's where we want the top. We want the top. And we're going to match up the one on the other side. I'm doing that by feel on this side so they're both in exactly the same spot. And now I'm just going to stitch around the edge of each of those. And now those are on. Now that we've got those on, we're just going to put our clip right in the center. So I'm just going to match up where those lines are. That's better. And then I'm going to put the back on, fold the edges down, and there we have one part. I'll do the other one. Put the back on. And there's our other one. So now when we stick those together, they will match up beautifully. All right, now we're going to put in our gusset. So we're going to do exactly the same thing we did last time, remembering one side is shorter than the other. So we're going to put them together, stitch a half inch down the side, and then top stitch both sides. Open it up. Alright, there I have it again, exactly the way our other one was. I'm going to trim off those threads and then clip it on to the front and back panel. Okay, we're going to put the gusset on the lining. So one side is longer than the other. We're going to take the side that's longer and we're going to clip it onto here. And then I'm going to line up the bottom marking here, the bottom center. And I'm going to put a clip, and then I'm just going to clip all the way around and do my triangles on the side and clip them in place. And now we're going to take this over to the machine and using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew all the way around. And now that we have that all sewed on, we're literally just going to flip this one on top and do exactly the same thing all the way around. Now this time as we're sewing, this is the side that has the zip pocket still open. So we are going to leave the bottom of this open as well. So I'm just going to remove those to remind me. So we're going to sew from here to here and from here to here and stop. Just like we did for the outside, I'm just going to go around and clip all these edges. And now I'm going to turn this in the right way, and I'm going to open that zipper pocket. Just want to make sure I can get my hand through there. Now we're going to prepare part of the strap and the 2 strap connectors. The strap is 40 inches wide, 40 inches long and 4 inches wide. And all we're going to do is we're going to rule a line down the center and put double-sided tape on it. And you can take a double-sided tape, place it all the way down the center. And then I'm going to peel that off. And I'm going to fold the edges into the center and I'm going to stick them down. I'm going to do that for both sides. Okay, once we've got those edges folded in, I'm just going to fold it in half again. So now I have a 1 inch wide strap, and I'm going to top stitch both sides of that strap. And there's our nice strap. And there we have our strap connectors. Ooh, pretty awesome. Okay, so with our straps, we have two sides. We've got the side that has the join in it, and then our top side. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over so the side with the join is in the middle. And then we're going to take our strap connector and we're just going to slide it on there. And I'm going to place a clip at the end just to hold it for the time being. And I can put that aside. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. And now I have my two strap connectors. Now, in preparation of putting our lining in, we're going to reduce some of the bulk that's around on these seams at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to get my scissors and I'm going to cut some of that off. So now there's heaps less to stitch over. Then on each side I'm going to take one of my strap connectors and I'm going to put it in there. Center it. And then the same on the other side. Centered. And then I'm going to take my lining and match up. So one side's higher, one side's lower, and I'm going to push that inside. And then I'm going to match up those edges and I'm going to clip them in place. And now using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to stitch all the way around. And back stitch. I'm going to trim that off. Trim that off. If you wanted to, you could give that another stitch across where the straps are, but I don't think I need to. So now I'm going to turn all of this through the bottom of the lining. I'm going to cut down some of that seam bulk and put some clips in there to help it sit nice and straight. Now that should sit a lot nicer. So now I'm going to smooth out all those edges and put some clips there, because then we're going to top stitch everything down. This does take some maneuvering and it's not the easiest thing to do, but if you just be patient, you'll get there. Alright, once you've got it all in place, you can just go ahead and using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, stitch with a really nice long top stitch all the way around the edge. Here's our beautiful top stitching done. Now before I finish off this lining, I am going to spend some time massaging out these seams. So I'm just pushing on them with my hands, just making them, see how they're coming into shape now? So the more time you spend doing this, the nicer the shape you'll get. Just rubbing your fingers all along those seams. See, I'm starting to get a much nicer shape now. For example, you can see here, if I start pushing on it, I'm going to massage it into shape. You can see now it's starting to curve nicely. I'm going to keep doing that till I'm happy with it. It will sit better in a day or two once it's had time to rest. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to pull out our lining and we're going to reach in through that zipper pocket, and I'm going to grab the ends of my lining and pull them through the zipper pocket, and then I'm going to match up those ends and stitch them together. So just stitch along there. Trim off those threads. And now I'm just going to push that back into there, but I'm going to keep my pocket out, and then I'm just going to fold the edges in of my zipper pocket, and I'm going to stitch that edge down as well. So we're closing up the zipper pocket. Push that back in there. spread out my lining. Just pushing it all back in. You can see in there I've got my lining pocket. See, down there. Close that up. Nice neat finish on the top of the bag. And now that it's being massaged a little bit, it's really coming together. Now I'll just get my strap. Now we'll strap this on. And there you have it.
Subscribe to my channel and like this page and hit the little bell so you'll be notified every time a new video is released.